Welcome to Alternatify, the space where we dare to ask the most compelling questions about history. We delve into the pivotal moments, the turning points, and the roads not taken to explore the profound what-ifs that shape our understanding of the past and present. Today we journey back to a year that shimmered with both hope and despair, 1848. The year 1848 stands as a monumental epoch in European history. It was a period of unprecedented upheaval, a continent-wide eruption of revolutionary fervor that promised radical change. From Paris to Vienna, Berlin to Budapest, the old order trembled before the surging tide of popular discontent. But what if, against all odds, these scattered sparks had ignited a lasting flame? What if the 1848 revolutions, instead of collapsing, had actually succeeded? This is the core question we confront today, a question that opens the door to a truly transformative alternate reality. Imagine a Europe fundamentally reshaped, not by the slow grind of diplomacy or the brutal force of empire, but by the collective will of its people. Our hypothetical outcome is nothing less than the emergence of a unified, democratic Europe, born from the crucible of revolution. This exploration is not merely an academic exercise. It is a thought experiment in the grandest sense. We will examine the potential for a utopian vision, but also the inevitable new conflicts and challenges such a radical shift would bring. Join us as we uncover the possibilities, the pitfalls, and the global ripple effects of a truly revolutionary 1848. Mid-19th century Europe was a continent teetering on the brink, a veritable pressure cooker of simmering discontent. Beneath the veneer of monarchical stability, powerful forces were at play, pushing societies towards an inevitable breaking point. The air was thick with anticipation, a sense that the old ways could not hold much longer. The intellectual currents of the Enlightenment had long since permeated European thought, championing reason, individual rights, and popular sovereignty. These ideals, coupled with the enduring legacy of the French Revolution, had planted seeds of radicalism and self-determination across the continent. A new consciousness was awakening, demanding a voice. Societal grievances were rampant and deeply felt. Autocratic rule stifled freedoms, while archaic feudal systems still bound vast swathes of the population to the land. Widespread poverty, exacerbated by rapid population growth and uneven industrialization, fueled a profound sense of injustice among the working classes and peasantry. The Congress of Vienna, convened in 1815, had attempted to turn back the clock, restoring monarchies and suppressing liberal and nationalist movements. Its architects deliberately ignored the burgeoning popular desires for self-governance and national unity. This imposed order, designed to maintain peace, instead fostered deep-seated resentment and a yearning for change. Economic catalysts further intensified the volatile atmosphere. The early stages of industrialization brought immense hardship to many, displacing traditional livelihoods and creating overcrowded, unsanitary urban centers. Crucially, a series of devastating crop failures, culminating in the infamous potato famine, pushed millions to the brink of starvation. The ignition point arrived in February 1848 in the streets of Paris. The overthrow of King Louis-Philippe, a seemingly minor event, sent shockwaves across the continent. This single act of defiance became the spark that ignited a chain reaction, triggering continent-wide uprisings that spread with astonishing speed. From Berlin to Vienna, Milan to Budapest, the revolutionary demands echoed with remarkable consistency. People clamored for written constitutions that would limit monarchical power and guarantee fundamental rights. They demanded representative governments, where their voices could be heard through elected parliaments. And perhaps most powerfully, they called for national unity, seeking to redraw the map of Europe along ethnic and linguistic lines. The revolutionary movements of 1848 were not monolithic. They comprised a diverse array of factions, each with distinct goals and visions for the future. Liberals, nationalists, socialists, and radicals often found themselves uneasy allies, united only by their opposition to the existing order. This complex tapestry of aspirations would prove both a strength and a weakness. Liberal aspirations centered on the establishment of constitutional monarchies, where the power of the sovereign would be checked by law and parliament. They championed individual freedoms, such as freedom of speech, assembly, and the press, and advocated for property rights and a more open meritocratic society. Their vision was one of gradual reform, not radical upheaval. Nationalist ambitions were perhaps the most potent and widespread. Across fragmented lands like Italy and Germany, and within multi-ethnic empires like Austria, people yearned for self-determination. They sought the formation of unified nation-states, where shared language, culture, and history would bind communities together under a single flag. This dream often clashed with existing imperial boundaries. Socialist and radical visions pushed beyond mere political reform, aiming for a more fundamental restructuring of society. They envisioned a more egalitarian world, addressing the profound economic inequalities exacerbated by industrialization. Some advocated for workers' rights, social welfare programs, and even the abolition of private property, seeking to create a truly just society. Among the myriad figures who rose to prominence, two stand out as emblematic of the revolutionary spirit. Giuseppe Mazzini, the fervent Italian patriot, dedicated his life to the cause of a unified, republican Italy. Through his Young Italy movement, he inspired countless revolutionaries with his vision of a free and independent nation, free from foreign domination and monarchical rule. Lajos Kossuth, the charismatic Hungarian leader, became the voice of Hungarian independence. A brilliant orator, he fought tirelessly for a democratic republic, free from Austrian imperial control. His impassioned speeches rallied the Hungarian people, igniting a fierce desire for self-governance and national dignity. Despite their shared revolutionary zeal, internal divisions frequently plagued the movements. Liberals often recoiled from the radical demands of socialists, fearing social chaos and the erosion of property rights. Nationalists, while united against common oppressors, frequently clashed among themselves over territorial claims and the definition of national identity. These ideological fissures ran deep. This inherent disunity proved to be a fatal flaw. The inability of the various factions to forge a cohesive strategy or present a united front allowed the old order to exploit their weaknesses. Precious time and energy were wasted on internal squabbles, diverting focus from the common enemy and ultimately undermining the revolutionary cause. Despite the initial widespread success and the fervent hopes they ignited, the revolutions of 1848 ultimately collapsed. The spring of nations gave way to a harsh winter of reaction, leaving behind a legacy of dashed dreams and brutal repression. Understanding this failure is crucial to imagining a different outcome. One primary reason for their ultimate failure was the enduring strength of the old order. Monarchs and their aristocratic allies, though initially caught off guard, possessed superior resources, well-trained armies, and generations of experience in wielding power. They were ruthless in their determination to restore their authority, unafraid to use overwhelming force. The Austrian Empire, in particular, demonstrated its formidable military might in crushing uprisings across its vast domains. Compounding this, revolutionary disunity proved to be a fatal Achilles' heel. The internal squabbles over goals, tactics, and vision prevented the formation of a unified strategy. There was no central leadership capable of coordinating the disparate movements across Europe, leading to isolated struggles that could be picked off one by the resurgent monarchies. The lack of a common agenda meant that victories in one region could not be leveraged to support struggles elsewhere. Furthermore, the revolutionaries often failed to gain widespread popular support beyond the urban centers and intellectual elites. While students, artisans, and the middle classes were fervent proponents of change, the vast majority of the peasantry, who constituted the bulk of the population, remained largely unengaged. Their primary concern was often land reform and the abolition of feudal dues, issues that were not always prioritized by the liberal or nationalist leaders. This meant the revolutions lacked the broad base of support needed to withstand sustained counterattacks. Finally, poor planning and execution plagued many of the revolutionary efforts. The revolutionaries, often intellectuals or idealists, lacked military experience and organizational skills. They struggled to form effective fighting forces, manage logistics, or coordinate large-scale operations. This amateurism was no match for the professional armies of the established powers, leading to a series of bloody defeats. The outcome was a tragic and predictable cycle. Initial revolutionary victories were followed by a swift and brutal counter-revolution. Leaders were arrested, imprisoned, or forced into exile. Constitutions were revoked, and newly won freedoms were suppressed. The old order, having learned from its temporary setback, reasserted its authority with renewed vigor, often leading to even harsher repression than before. Europe returned to its monarchical status quo, but the seeds of future conflict had been sown. Now let us turn the page of history and imagine a different outcome. What if the revolutionaries of 1848, against all odds, had overcome their divisions? What if they had successfully defeated the entrenched old order, not just in isolated pockets but across the continent? In this alternate timeline, a truly unified democratic Europe emerges from the ashes of the old regimes. This hypothetical success would not have resulted in a single monolithic superstate, but rather a federation or union of autonomous nations. Each nation, having achieved its self-determination, would retain its unique cultural identity and internal governance. The vision is one of cooperation and shared purpose, not absorption. This structure would respect the burgeoning nationalist sentiments while channeling them into a larger cooperative framework. At the heart of this new European order would be a set of core institutions designed to bind the nations together. A shared constitution, ratified by all member states, would lay out the fundamental principles of governance and the rights of citizens. A common currency would facilitate trade and economic integration, fostering prosperity across the Union. Most importantly, an unwavering commitment to democratic principles would be enshrined, ensuring that the power resided with the people. Governance would be structured to reflect this democratic and federalist vision. A strong central government with clearly defined powers related to defense, foreign policy, and economic coordination would provide stability and direction. A European Parliament, directly elected by the people of all member nations, would serve as the legislative body, ensuring popular representation. This Parliament would be the voice of the European citizenry, debating and enacting laws that serve the common good. The European Constitution would be the bedrock of this new union, guaranteeing fundamental rights and freedoms for all citizens. It would enshrine principles such as freedom of speech, assembly, religion, and the press, ensuring that the abuses of the old autocratic regimes could never return. It would also define the relationship between the central government and the autonomous member states, balancing unity with national sovereignty. This unified, democratic Europe would stand as a beacon of hope to the world. It would be a powerful force for peace and prosperity, demonstrating that nations could cooperate and thrive without resorting to conflict. It would serve as a compelling model for global democracy, inspiring other peoples to cast off the shackles of oppression and embrace self-governance. The dream of 1848, once shattered, would finally be realized, ushering in an era of unprecedented cooperation and progress. The immediate aftermath of such a successful revolution would be nothing short of transformative. The old monarchies, stripped of their power, would either be abolished or reduced to purely ceremonial roles. The aristocracy, their feudal privileges dismantled, would see their influence wane dramatically. This would be a true transfer of power, from the few to the many. The redrawing of the European map would be swift and decisive. Italy would emerge as a unified republic, free from Austrian and papal influence. Germany, coalescing around a democratic parliament, would form a federal state, perhaps without the Prussian dominance that characterized our timeline. Hungary would gain its independence, likely as a republic, and the multi-ethnic Austrian Empire would dissolve into its constituent national states, perhaps forming a loose confederation. The establishment of democratic institutions would be paramount. Constituent assemblies would convene across the continent, drafting new national constitutions that reflected the will of the people. Universal male suffrage would likely be introduced, granting a voice to millions previously excluded from the political process. The foundations of modern parliamentary democracy would be firmly laid. Economic reforms would follow rapidly, aimed at addressing the grievances that fueled the revolutions. Feudal obligations would be abolished, freeing the peasantry from centuries of servitude and allowing them to own the land they tilled. Guild restrictions would be lifted, promoting free enterprise and industrial growth. These reforms would unleash immense economic potential, fostering a more dynamic and equitable marketplace. The social landscape would undergo a profound shift. The rigid class hierarchies of the old order would begin to erode, replaced by a more fluid and meritocratic society. Education would be expanded and made more accessible, empowering citizens with knowledge and critical thinking skills. The arts and sciences, freed from censorship and patronage, would flourish in an environment of intellectual freedom. However, this new dawn would not be without its challenges. The transition from centuries of autocratic rule to democratic governance would be fraught with difficulties. Establishing stable political systems, managing diverse national interests, and integrating newly empowered populations would require immense skill and compromise. The ghosts of the old order would linger, and their supporters would undoubtedly seek to undermine the new system. The initial years would be a delicate balancing act, navigating the complexities of nation-building and interstate cooperation. The euphoria of victory would eventually give way to the hard work of governance. Yet the fundamental shift in power and the commitment to democratic principles would provide a strong foundation for overcoming these hurdles. The long-term consequences of a unified democratic Europe emerging from 1848 would ripple across the globe, fundamentally altering the course of history. The very nature of international relations would be transformed, moving away from the balance of power politics dominated by empires towards a more cooperative, rules-based order. Without the Franco-Prussian War, the unification of Germany under Prussian militarism would be averted. This would prevent the rise of a powerful, aggressive German empire, a key factor in the lead-up to World War I in our timeline. The absence of this particular historical trajectory would dramatically reshape the geopolitical landscape of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The scramble for Africa, a brutal period of colonial expansion, might unfold very differently. A democratic Europe, founded on principles of self-determination, might be less inclined towards aggressive imperialism. While colonialism might not disappear entirely, its character could be less exploitative, perhaps focusing more on trade and cultural exchange rather than outright conquest and resource extraction. The two world wars as we know them might never occur. The underlying causes, intense nationalism, imperial rivalries, and the rigid alliance systems, would be significantly mitigated in a cooperative European federation. Disputes would be resolved through diplomacy and parliamentary debate, rather than military confrontation. This would spare humanity untold suffering and loss of life. The Cold War, too, would be an unlikely outcome. Without the ideological clash between Soviet communism and Western capitalism, the global geopolitical landscape would be entirely different. The absence of a divided Germany and a fractured Europe would remove a central flashpoint of the Cold War, leading to a more stable and less confrontational international order. Technological and scientific progress would likely accelerate in a peaceful, cooperative Europe. Resources that would have been diverted to military build-up and conflict would instead be invested in research, education, and infrastructure. The free exchange of ideas and talent across national borders would foster innovation, leading to breakthroughs in medicine, engineering, and communication. The global spread of democracy would be profoundly influenced. A successful democratic Europe would serve as a powerful example, inspiring movements for self-governance and human rights worldwide. The principles of popular sovereignty and individual liberty would gain greater traction, potentially leading to a more democratic and peaceful 20th century globally. However, this utopian vision is not without its potential pitfalls. Even a unified Europe would face internal tensions. National identities, though part of a larger union, could still lead to friction. Economic disparities between regions might persist, creating social unrest. The challenge of integrating diverse cultures and languages into a cohesive political entity would be ongoing. New forms of conflict might emerge. Ideological battles, perhaps between different interpretations of democracy or economic systems, could replace traditional interstate warfare. The very success of this European model might provoke external reactions, leading to new alliances or rivalries with non-democratic powers. The path to perpetual peace is rarely smooth. The thought experiment of a successful 1848 revolution offers a compelling glimpse into a radically different historical trajectory. It paints a picture of a Europe that chose cooperation over conflict, democracy over autocracy, and unity over fragmentation. It is a powerful reminder of the contingent nature of history, where seemingly small decisions or shifts in momentum can lead to vastly different outcomes. This alternate history underscores the profound impact of the choices made by leaders and the collective will of the people. The failures of 1848 in our timeline were not inevitable, They were the result of specific circumstances, internal divisions, and the strength of the old order. Imagining a different path allows us to appreciate the fragility of progress and the enduring struggle for freedom and self-determination. The legacy of 1848, even in its failure, continues to resonate. The ideals of liberty, equality, and national self-determination that fueled those revolutions never truly died. They continued to inspire movements for change throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, eventually leading to many of the democratic institutions we cherish today. The European Union, in many ways, is a modern echo of the federalist dreams of some 1848 revolutionaries. So what can we learn from this journey into the past that never was? Perhaps it is a renewed appreciation for the hard-won freedoms we possess. Perhaps it is a deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world, both seen and unseen. And perhaps most importantly, it is an invitation to continue asking what if, to explore the infinite possibilities of history, and to imagine a future shaped by the lessons of the past. Thank you for joining us on this speculative journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep imagining the many paths history could have taken.